Hi, everybody. Appreciate you joining today. Excited to talk about state trial court legal analytics. I am happy to take questions throughout the presentation. You can feel free at that point to unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can throw it into the Q&A chat and I will try and watch that, or leave some time for questions at the end of the program as well. So with that, I will dive in. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm Nicole Clark. I am the founder and CEO of Trellis. Trellis is a state trial court research platform. We focus specifically on the state trial court system. And the way you might think about Pacer as a way to search federal trial court data, it's a way to think about Trellis as well. We go in county by county, aggregate the data, structure it, normalize it, and then make it searchable. So dive into all of that a little bit later, but my background is as a labor and employment attorney. I practiced in state trial court constantly, simply couldn't believe that it was so difficult to access information. So with that, worked with some very smart engineer friends of mine, and we got together to try to start aggregating this data to create a database sort of much like Lexis or Westlaw for Court of Appeals data, but for the state trial court system. So today we're going to be covering judge analytics and ruling history. Basically, how do you research your judge? How can you use motions that have been filed by other attorneys across the state trial court system to be more persuasive, to write motions faster, be more successful? A little bit about verdict data and thinking about exposure case valuation. And then just in general, what are some abilities to research state court data that can give you an advantage, including how do you set yourself alerts at the state trial court level so that you can get notified in real time as cases are moving forward or particular legal issues are being litigated. So to start with judge analytics and ruling history. So you've been assigned a judge. What is the next step? The next step is knowing a little bit about the judge. So many of us, myself included, would send around an email asking our colleagues if anyone has intel on the judge. That's fine to do, and it's still something you should be doing, but there is hard data available now. And so you really should be looking up your judge from the start of a case, understanding, has the judge ruled on your case dispositive issues before? That really is something that you need to know from the start of the case to be able to make some informed decisions about how to be strategic. The other piece is digging in on the judge's actual ruling history. You can do that because Trellis has a database of tentative rulings, largest database of tentative rulings. This is killing me. So you can actually look up your judge's prior rulings on very specific motions, very specific legal issues. So what are some of the things to think about? You want to look up analytics on your judge, and you want to use those as you're thinking about whether to request reassignment to a different judge, or whether this is a judge that you should be bringing a dispositive motion in MSJ before. What is the success rate of other attorneys? And understanding some of that, including looking at it and bringing your client in if you're an attorney and discussing the judge's hard data with your client, setting expectations there as well. So with that, what I want to do is actually just dive into the analytics and show you directly. So this is our homepage of our website. I will switch us to California, but basically, think about this as searching Google, the way you would search natural language searches. When I am searching in a particular state here in California, what this means in California is that I'm searching across the superior courts in California. If I were to click multiple states, I'd be searching across the state trial courts across those states. Now you can narrow by county, et cetera, as we go forward, but just to know what you're searching, you are searching the state trial courts in that state when you're searching in a particular state. But before we jump into research, let's talk about judge analytics in particular. So the best way to get to judge analytics is to come right up here to the judge analytics tab. And then you want to make sure you're in the state that you want to be searching in. And I like to just search my judge by last name. I find that is the easiest way to do it. And I'm going to throw in a last name. My internet is a little bit slow today, but we should be. All right, so you're just going to click on the judge's name. And what I'm going to load is our judicial analytics dashboard. So what does that mean? For every judge, it's going to be these 5 tabs: the bio, at a glance, motions, outcomes, and milestones. So let's talk a little bit about that. The bio is going to be all your subjective information about the judge. So think about if you were to do a deep dive on biography, career history, political affiliation, all of that information, we try and have easy for you on one page about the judge. But you're also going to have a lot of practical information on this page, like the court's info, the clerk's phone number. If there are department-specific rules, we will list that here. So basically trying to really marry the biographical and the practical information about your judge on one page. Now you can certainly jump into your judge's actual cases and start searching from this page, but I'll show you a way that I prefer to do it in a moment, which is going to be through the Smart Search. But to get back to analytics for a moment, the next page is our at a glance. I like to think of the at a glance as a high level. If someone were to give you one page of the stats that mattered about your judge, what would you want on that page? And that's what we try to do. So how many active cases? What's the average number of days that a case sits before a judge? What is the judge's overall motion grant rate? You'll notice that we always do the context. We'll give you the context for other judges in the county. So you're really stacked ranking them against each other. And then next will be the context for other judges in the state. So you'll always be able to see where your judge is an outlier in comparison to other judges. The verdict widget here, this is specific to bench trials. We will talk a little bit more about jury verdicts in a little bit. But if you were to end up in a bench trial before this judge, historically, have they ruled more often for plaintiff or defense? A little bit lower on the page is going to be the judge's case calendar breakdown. So what we're saying here is basically what are the types of cases that this judge hears? Now, the big pie is going to be practice area, which will load up the little pie and tell you exactly what that means. So for example, we're looking at Honorable Hamilton here. So if you had a 50% torts docket, well, what does that actually mean? How many are economic opposed to construction liability or products liability? And the goal there is to help users understand if the judge is super experienced and sophisticated with particular practice areas, or if it's something where you might need to do some educating from the very start, because it's just simply not a matter type that the judge hears very often. The motions tab is the opposite of the at a glance. Motions is granular, motion by motion analysis. How does this judge rule on specific pretrial motions? So you'll notice again, your judge that you're researching will always be first, then the county average, then the state average, and you'll just be able to choose between the motions that you think are important. So if you wanted to look at, in this case, MSAs, and then maybe how does that differ between an MSJ? Is there a difference in the way the judge thinks about those cases? Is he slightly more lenient on one as compared to the other? And then of course, county and state averages as well. The outcomes is basically how are similar cases getting disposed of. Now you'll be able to drill down a few areas here, first by practice area, then by matter type. If you're in all, you are looking at the case outcomes for all case types for this judge. But you can of course drill down, and let's say maybe you specifically wanted to look at wrongful termination cases. So if you had a wrongful termination labor and employment case before Honorable Hamilton, what actually happens in similar cases? How many get removed to federal court? How many are getting consolidated with other cases? So really just practical analysis of the way similar cases have moved forward before this judge. And then finally, milestones. So milestones is your timing analysis. Again, you'll be able to drill down by practice area and matter type. So we can dig in again to a wrongful termination case and see. So average case duration. This means no matter what the disposition is, whether it's settled, whether it makes it all the way to trial, on average, how many days does this practice area and matter type tend to last before a judge? And then of course, your judge first, then county average, then state average. So here you can see Honorable Hamilton is pretty close in line with other judges in the county, a little bit faster than other judges in the state in general. But now you'll notice average time to trial. If you're actually going to take a case all the way to trial before Honorable Hamilton, expect to be there quite a bit longer. In fact, it's not, he's still in line with other judges in the county, but he's significantly longer than other judges in the state in general. And this final widget here, time to the first dismissal order. This is for all the cases that don't make it to trial, the 99.7% of cases, how long until the most likely outcome, which is settlement. And what we track to in this metric is when the judge first enters a dismissal order in the case. And I see we've got a couple questions, so I can jump in. Yes, the recorded version will be available later. Do we have analytics on small claims judges? We do not. It's going to be civil and limited and above. However, you will most likely find biographies for all judges, including district court judges and criminal judges as well. So that's something to know. One note is if you come into our judge analytics area and you're looking for a judge and you don't see their name listed, the best thing to do is to toggle off the analytics only. We should have biographies and all of that practical information for all of the judges out there. So if you don't see a judge, it might be that we don't have enough data to do analytics for them, or they are in an area that we don't classify analytics for, but you'll still have practical biographical information that you'll be able to look through. Also, what I would say is, we have analytics for a fair amount of judges, but let's say there was a judge that we didn't have analytics yet. Very often you can still find their data in the Smart Search, and we'll dig in on that in a little bit as well. We had another question here. How do we look at referees, commissioners, similar to arbitrators or mediators as well? So the answer is going to be yes, you can search them through the Smart Search. Now, we won't have analytics on them, but you can dig into their underlying data. So for an arbitrator in particular, we very well may have analytics. If it's a judge that was previously on the bench, we might have analytics on how they ruled when they were on the bench, as even when judges retire, we keep their analytics up and available. Other than that, you can still search arbitrators, mediators, commissioners, and if they are referenced in court documents or in the docket, you'll be able to search and bring up cases that they're related to, and we'll get into that in just a moment. Thanks for those great questions. All right, so we talked about judge analytics, but my favorite aspect is really doing the in-depth understanding of a judge's thought process, of their ruling history. So how do you do that? You're going to come into our Smart Search, and I'll show you a couple examples shortly, but you're going to just type judge : and the judge's last name. What happens is whenever you search for a judge, and really no matter what you're searching in our Smart Search, you're always searching for buckets of data. Of course, again, specifically state trial court data. So you won't find federal data on our platform, nor will you find Court of Appeals. We have a state trial court system, but you'll always be searching for buckets of data. So if you're searching a judge, rulings, these are going to be tentative rulings issued by the judge that you're researching. Dockets, high-level overview, all of their cases. Documents filed in cases where they're presiding, and verdicts, cases that have gone to verdict before that judge. So now you've narrowed to a specific judge's data. What is the next step? Add a case dispositive issue, as we talked about. So you can see in this example, I did Judge Heiberger and strict liability. And I'm in the dockets tab here, so I'm specifically wanting to pull up cases in which Honorable Heiberger was hearing a strict liability issue. Another example here, I did Judge Freeman and design defect. So here I'm specifically looking at rulings issued by Honorable Freeman on cases dealing with a design defect issue. So one thing to note there, Judge the judge's last name, no space in between, just go directly into the judge's last name. And an or are going to be your main terms and connector. All of the Boolean that you're used to on Lexis or Westlaw will primarily work on Trellis as well, but we also function a lot like Google in terms of a natural language search. When you're saying and between two terms, you're requiring results that include both of those results. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about how to create some searches. With that, I actually want to jump in a little bit more to show you judge research. So we talked about the analytics. Let's go to the smart search. I'm going to get us into a specific judge. And I'll do Honorable Nieto. So what I've done now, just as we saw the example, is I have narrowed us into Honorable Nieto's data. Again, rulings are tentative rulings, dockets are cases, documents are as they sound. But let's actually take a look at some of these pages so you get an understanding of what they include. First, I'm going to narrow us to a legal issue. That's the first thing I like to do when I start researching my judge. Motion types and legal issues, I like to hone in there as well if I have a particular motion that I want to bring or that's pending before them. So let's say I wanted to find Honorable Nieto ruling on a disability discrimination issue. Just jump into one of our ruling pages to show you. So this is a ruling page. As with any of our pages, you're going to find most of the case metadata over here on the right-hand side. The judge will take you to the judge's biography and analytics. Case number, this will always take you to the docket of the case. Across counties, across states, if you're searching across states, that functionality will always be the same. And parties, if you click on a party, will basically run a search for that party. So you're searching for all of that party's other litigation pending in the jurisdiction that you're searching. But here to talk about the ruling for a moment, you can get some incredibly useful information by searching your judge's rulings from the start of a case. So here, if I had a disability discrimination matter, I can actually dig in and see what is the Court of Appeals case law that she thinks is persuasive? What is the legal threshold? How does she think about these cases in general? And you're at a great starting place then when you know a little bit about how the judge has handled similar cases. Let's go back for a moment just to jump on to some of our other pages to show them for a second. So dockets. Now, of course, I'm specifically looking at Honorable Nieto's disability discrimination cases, but let's jump into a docket for a moment. Now, much like if you were searching on a county court website, you will find all of the information that you would find along with some additional enhanced data. So of course, the case number, the filing date, you'll find classifications as well. What's the practice area? What's the category? How many days was the case pending? What was the outcome of the case? Next step, of course, will be parties, just like on our other pages. We will break down who are the litigants and who are counsel in the case. But when we think about parties, counsel and the individual litigants will be in this pile. It is the way that the courts give us data, so it's how we present it to you guys as well. So know that. And just as a quick note, if I wanted to find all of Shigerian and Associates' other cases, simply click on them. The other thing I could do would just be to type in Shigerian and Associates into our smart search, and that would search for them as well. Now, a little bit lower on the page is going to be the actual docket. So you'll see all of the docket entries going from complaint being filed all the way through. Now, a couple notes here. This case looks like it was already dismissed, but let's say you're looking at this case and you know that something happened in this case yesterday. You don't see it updated on Trellis yet. Well, we have a ton of things that tell us to go back and refresh a case, but if for some reason you want to just be absolutely positive that it is as up to date as possible, you can always press this right here, update case information. Once we've determined that a case is closed, we stop updating it. But again, if you want to be absolutely sure, press this update case information button. What happens is we move this docket to the very top of our queue. We go back to the court and refresh it in real time. So I'll press it and show you guys. I'll get very shortly a little pop-up that says, hey, we're grabbing the most recent updates. I'm going to get an email about 30 seconds later that says the case is updated. Now, if there are any new docket entries, if documents available, if there are any new documents filed in the case, those will be available as well. And jumping us back in, what have I not shown you of our buckets of data, the documents tab? Let's just jump into a document. One thing to note is as you're searching, the images, the first page of the document will load if you just start to scroll down to the page. And to open up a document page and show you what they look like. So now I'm on a document page. You'll notice you can scroll through the entire document from this page. So you can decide, is it useful? Is it helpful? Do you actually want to spend the time to download this document? Did you mean to get a different document in the case? Maybe the case is on point, but you want to see what else was filed in the case. Again, at any point, click on to the docket, which will take you back to the docket of the case. Now I'm on the docket of that particular case, all without leaving Trellis. And the documents filed will be listed. And then below that is going to be the docket entries themselves. We had a quick question on coverage, so let's talk about it now. You will find coverage on every one of our pages at the footer of our pages. So you can come down here. We are very transparent about coverage. I'm going to jump into state coverage, and I'll stay specific to California for you guys since I'm sure that's what you're interested in most. But we will list state by state exactly what we cover, including how many counties and exactly which features across our site we cover for that state. So I'll jump into California. Now, in this page, what we do is we list every court that we cover, court, county, sometimes synonymous. What we do is we'll list county by county. And then what does it mean when we cover a county? Well, it means that we have at least 15 years of historical docket data, as well as the cases updated moving forward and new cases being filed. So that's what we mean when we say we cover a county. Now, for many of these counties, we have searchable file documents as well. We were in a document page just a moment ago. When we start, basically when you will start to see document coverage is going to depend on the county. It's generally when the county started digitizing and saving records, sometimes 2012, sometimes 2015, as I'm sure you know, some counties still don't. If it's a court that you have to send a runner into, you generally will not find it on Trellis, but do note that we now allow access to Alameda County documents on our site. The other note is, if you're wondering, do you have searchable documents, Trellis, for a specific county? Any asterisks that you see next to a county, this means that there are searchable file documents available for that county. All right, so now let's talk about the next thing, which is how do you use this data to draft better motions, faster motions, generally be more competitive? Well, there's two ways to think about utilizing Trellis for motion drafting. One is going to be up here, this motions and issues tab. This is very popular with associates or folks that are getting familiar with a particular legal issue or motion that they don't have a ton of experience with. And think of this as just a primer, a treatise, right? For each jurisdiction, we give the most common motion types and the most common legal issues. Now, I'll just jump into one to show you. What we're going to give you as a primer, a treatise, all the basic information that you need to know about the legal issue or the motion type. Legal threshold, are there discovery requirements, all of that info on one page for you. So what is different about Trellis than any other treatise or rudder guide, etc.? Well, the difference is that you'll note that we actually will always on the page map you to cases dealing with whatever the legal issue or motion type is that you are searching. So I like to think of it as a way to understand sort of the academic, what should the Court of Appeals case law be, but married with the practical. How are trial court judges treating this issue right now? What is the case law that they're actually applying, and understanding that there can be a disparity there? And it's very helpful to know that from the start. So just the practical of understanding how these cases are moving through the trial courts right now, whether it be a particular motion type or legal issue. That's one way to start to think about drafting motions that are going to be persuasive. And of course, starting out ahead of the game, right? Knowing the basics before you start drafting your motion. Here I showed, this is another example of one of our motions and issues pages, express warranty products liability. Now, one of my very favorite aspects, and I will tell you years ago, I used Trellis as customer number one. And what I would do is I would find tentative rulings by my judge or by a judge that wrote really well-written substantive tentative rulings. And I would use that as an outline for my motion to the judge. It was incredibly successful. Where you can find a ruling that is by your judge, that's gold. You can see the way to organize it, to analyze it in the same way the judge is thinking about the issue. Miles ahead of where you could be. But I found it was really helpful regardless to just put the way to organize my motion in context. I could also see what judges were citing to in their tentative rulings as the legal authority. Now, if I wanted to do additional research on those Court of Appeals cases, I could. I knew what cases to look up. I had a starting place. So it just sets you very ahead of where you would be if you were to say start on Lexis or Westlaw and to try to figure out what are you trying to prove in the first place. You can be far ahead by using a strong ruling as an outline for a motion. But the other way to use us, and a very common use case on our platform and for this data in general, is as a brief bank. We have over 100 million searchable file documents on Trellis. So I know many times we all think it's a matter of first impression and no one has dealt with this procedural issue in the past. Someone likely did something that's going to be helpful for you in giving a little bit of context. This is particularly true for discovery issues, pretrial procedural issues. Anything that it's never going to make it to appeal, it's never going to make it onto the appellate court research websites. All of that will live at the state trial court level. So it's really where you should be searching for that type of information. One thing that's special about our document database is that we index the body and text of the file documents, meaning the body and text of the documents are searchable on our site. So when you're searching in the Smart Search, you are actually searching the body and text of the file documents in here. Now, there can be incredibly useful information hidden in the body and text of file documents. And of course, this is data that you would never know existed because you wouldn't be able to search a county court website by judge or legal issue or opposing counsel or any of the ways that you can search on Trellis. Of course, to search on a county court website, assuming the documents were available, you have to know the docket number. So what we do is allow you to find cases that you wouldn't know existed and be able to use those strategically in your practice. We actually are now at over 100 million, so continuing to grow on a daily basis. Example of one of our document pages. So wanted to show some examples here of the way to mix and match different searches. In this case, I wanted to search for products liability memorandums filed by Johnson & Johnson. So the way that I like to use our search is and then additional search terms and additional search terms to continue to narrow deeper and deeper into what is going to be most relevant. I'll actually jump back to this in a second, but let's jump in to show the way I would think about utilizing us as a brief bank. So I'm going to search for a motion type. I'll stay super broad here. And in fact, I'm going to put this in quotes. Now, whether to use quotes or not, this depends on what you're searching for. Do you remember if you don't use quotes, it's going to individually index each word and use a relevancy algorithm to determine the sorting of the results. I often like to go broad, no quotations, see how many results I get, see if it's too broad, and then narrow from there. But summary judgment, the next thing I'd want to do is add whatever the case is positive, the causes of action are, to continue to narrow me down. To use us as a brief bank, I'd want to live in our documents tab. Now, of course, on any one of our pages, you can continue to filter once you have created a search that you think is going to be the most relevant. You can filter by practice area, by specific motion type, by outcome. What does entry type mean? Entry type means how did Trellis classify the docket entry that the document that you're looking at is associated with? You can narrow by judge. You can narrow by county. Now, remember, you can mix and match all of these. So let's say I specifically wanted to find, I will pick on Judge Anderle here. Summary judgment motions filed before Honorable Anderle. Two ways to do it. One, I could certainly go in and filter by the judge after I've run the search in general. But that same search that I showed you from the start is actually my favorite way to do it. Whatever my search terms are, and judge colon and the judge's last name. Now I've specifically narrowed to Honorable Anderle's documents related to summary judgment motions. Now, even when you've narrowed to specific case types, legal issues, opposing counsel, etc., you might still have a very big body of data. And let's say you were actually looking for a very specific document. If you should simply add and additional terms. So if I wanted the proposed order, because when I'm searching summary judgment here, I'm going to be pulling up all the documents related to summary judgment motions that are filed, which can be the notice and the motion and the memo of P's and A's. You just add and the specific of the document that you're looking for. So if I wanted a proposed order, I'd use and proposed order. If I want the memorandum of points and authorities, I'm going to say and memo. And now I have narrowed to the memorandums of P's and A's. And just to jump in again, show you an example. And I'm loading the document here, and I can scroll through it and determine if it's useful, if I want to keep searching. But that's the way I like to use us as a brief bank. Now, a couple things to note. I can go from here into the case docket and determine, was this motion granted? Did the judge issue a ruling on it post, which talked about what he liked or what he didn't like? So there's lots of ways to get really, really specific. So rather than simply using your document management system as a starting place or something you've written in the past that's similar, when you use the entire state trial court system as a brief bank, you can get data that's incredibly on point and that has a lot of strategic value to make sure that you're going to be successful from the start of the case. Oh, the reason that I wanted to include this, which is a motion for approval of a class action settlement as an example of a document that we have, is specifically for any of you who practice class action work, complex litigation. This is actually a trick to be able to uncover settlement figures in class action cases. Because class action settlements have to be approved by the judge, that means the settlement figures will actually be on Trellis. So you'll be able to see what did the class get, what did the third party administrator get, but most importantly, what were the attorney's fees? You can dig in by opposing counsel and attorney's fees and understand what they might be looking for. So a lot of strategic value in understanding potential trajectory and exposure for class action cases. And that data all lives at the state trial court level on Trellis, just as a reminder. So what are other ways to think about searching filed documents? You can search by legal issue, by motion type, by outcome, by judge, by case type, by attorney. My favorite, mix and match. I want to find this motion type dealing with this legal issue that was filed before this judge. I want to find where my opposing counsel has filed this motion type on this particular legal issue. So and mixing and matching is always going to be the way to get to the most relevant information. We talked a little bit about this, but searching documents filed by judge will give a lot of strategic value in understanding the judge and setting yourself up for success. Here's an example. I simply was searching for motions to compel arbitration before Honorable Cronland. Searching documents by party is another example. And in fact, searching party in our Smart Search across the 4 buckets of data. One thing that you'll be seeing is, let's say, potentially you had a major case against a large corporation. Well, where else are they getting sued? By whom? For what? In which counties? How have those cases played out? So, ton of ways to dig in, understanding high-level party research. Same goes if you happen to be representing a large client and you want to understand how the former counsel handled particular legal issues or motions in the past. You can gain a ton of insight by searching a particular party's litigation history, documents filed, dockets, etc. Here I did an example. I wanted to find summary judgment memorandums filed by 3M, the maker of masks, etc. So just the idea of mixing party and the motion type that you are interested in. Looking for an answer to a cross complaint by Best Buy. So lots of different ways to dig in. Searching filed documents is one of my favorite aspects of our site. And we hear folks really rave about the time and energy and success that they have with utilizing documents as an outline for what might be successful in cases. All right, switching gears for a moment to case valuation and verdict data. Well, we talked a little bit about utilizing motions for approval of class action settlements as a gauge for class action cases. That's a ton of fun if you practice class action work. But what are ways if you're looking for other verdict data? Well, good news is we have verdict data for California for cases going back to 2009. You'll just come here into the verdicts tab. Now, one of the things that's special about Trellis is if you're used to seeing verdict data, which is limited what's out there, you're going to see it as a blurb and the amount. What we do at Trellis is we take any relevant verdict information and we map it to the underlying trial court case. So you can actually see what happened in that case. If there were documents filed, does that give you any additional insight? Was there jury instructions or a verdict form that you can understand a little bit better? So giving you the context of what actually happened in the case by marrying whatever verdict information there is to the underlying case docket and documents. So let's search for an example here. First, you want to go into location. I clicked California here. Now note any one of these classifications are something you can narrow by. So you can narrow by practice area, or case type, or county, or judge, or attorney. Type of injury is another one as well. Now, I'll give you a hint here. We sometimes get very, very specific in type of injury. So let's say there was a leg injury that you wanted to see. Now, you'll note we can get very specific. But if I get very specific, I'm not going to be pulling all leg injuries. I'm only going to be pulling where there's a fracture of the femur. If I want instead to look across leg injuries, I can do this, select all. Now it will be pulling all injuries related to the leg. The other thing I can do, I will take this. The other thing I can do is simply do it as a keyword search. And you'll notice that verdicts was one of our buckets of data that you're searching when you're in our Smart Search. When you're in the Smart Search, you're basically doing a free text search. And that is what's pulling up the verdict data that's related to your search. These, of course, are very specific classifications where you know exactly what you want to find, this expert, this county, this injury, etc. But I can also go broad and say, I want in California, every case where a leg injury was alleged. Now, one of the cool things is whatever your search terms are, you're always going to be searching the aggregate averages for those search terms in our analytics section up here. So you always get the lowest verdict, the highest verdict, the average, and the median as well. And I'll tell you, the average is almost always thrown off by some ridiculously high verdict. That is why we give the median. We find that the median is actually a closer proxy to what average might look like if there weren't such extreme data points on either side. The other thing is we break down the decision history. And here you can see it's actually 50-50. So not particularly illuminating, but at least you know it's not a landslide for one party or the other. Below that is going to be the actual cases that are powering these analytics. So if you want to dig in directly to these cases, you can. And you can go through here. And let's jump into one of these just to show an example. So what you'll note is it takes us directly to the docket of the case. All the information that you'd otherwise find on the docket page, except now it's enhanced with the verdict information. What was the demand? What was the actual amount? What was the result? Depending on how much data is, or there can be a ton of information in here, the breakdown of the jury, lots of different pieces. It simply depends on the individual case. You'll find next parties, just like you would find on our docket page, but below that, you're going to find experts. So if there were experts that testified in this case, they're going to be listed. Now, just like if you were to click on a party, clicking on the expert will take you to all of the other cases where they have testified. And below that is going to be the docket of the case that you can dig into directly. So not sure if these guys are particularly prolific, but I will pick on Mr. Muse, an accident reconstruction expert. Now what we've done is run a search for him, and he has testified in 6 other cases. So the interesting thing there is you can go in and now you can look at those cases if you're doing research on an expert. Were they high stakes cases? Were they lower value cases? Did the side utilizing him win the verdict? So lots of ways to think about experts. If I were to specifically look for experts where they had testified and the case went all the way to verdict, this is the way I would look for it. But let's say I want to find cases where maybe the expert was designated, but it may have settled somewhere before the conclusion of trial, and I wanted to find anywhere that he testified. In that case, I'd simply search for him without the expert designation. And what that's going to do is it will find documents and rulings that reference him. And I can dig into those cases and understand them better. So that's one thing to note. You'll notice a drop down here that will pop up to basically say the main classifiers that are very common on our site, which are going to be judge : party : county : So if I wanted to narrow specifically to Alameda, county : Alameda. Now, what I would say about party : is I don't actually like using it. I like searching for an attorney or a law firm just by their name. Sometimes I will use first and last if I want to pull up documents that require both of them. If the name is at all unique, this will work. There are other ways to do it if the name is more, if you've got a John Smith name, it's going to be harder. But the way I would usually do that is search it, and then I'd find a case where that attorney testified, or I mean, that attorney was appearing counsel, and I click on the party, and then it's going to run a search more normalized for that attorney's name. Note there is to search, if you're searching attorneys, search the individual attorney and the law firm. Depending on the county, you will find that some list the law firm, some list the individual attorney testifying. The cool thing is that because we're pulling documents and making those searchable, where only the law firm is listed, you'll still see the attorney that filed the documents because they'll be part of the caption of the case. So you'll be able to find their filed documents that way. And vice versa, where it lists the individual attorney, you'll see the firm that they're at by digging into the documents and often the rulings as well. We talked about valuation and verdict data a bit. Now let's go more general and finish up and see if we've got any questions. So what are other ways to think about utilizing state court data in general for your practice? Well, one that I'd say is not to think of Trellis only as a universe for pulling particular cases or pulling particular documents. That's certainly a use case for us, a centralized system to be able to pull that data. But think of us as a starting place for your legal research in general. You'll find that trial court judges will often get to the heart of the matter, the meat, very, very quickly. And so if you search the general legal issue that you're facing and you are in state court, you're a state court practitioner, it's a great way to dive in very quickly and get an understanding for the matter in general, the legal threshold that's being applied right now, how judges are treating that issue. So I just did a search here for express warranty saying, I want to dig in and see how these cases are actually playing out right now. So I highly recommend thinking of us as a robust research platform from the start. The good news is you can understand here's a ruling that I could then see, okay, what's the Court of Appeals case law? Now, if I want to do further research at the appellate level, I can do that. I know what I want to look for. I'm very ready to dive in and do so very quickly. Other ways to think about utilizing us, expert testimony we talked about. Searching the expert's name, an exciting thing is that very often expert testimony is attached as exhibits to motions that are filed, meaning you can dive into their actual testimony, whether you're trying to find an expert that your judge has found qualified already, or understand how they're likely to testify again. Very, very useful to be able to dig in on some of that data. Jury instructions is one of my favorite. In the same way that I used to start out with sort of the state-sponsored Casey jury instructions and have a look there as a starting place. What am I trying to prove? I really like doing that on Trellis, searching jury instructions, maybe jury instructions that were prepared by the opposing law firm in a similar case, and understand exactly how they're thinking about it, or just well-written jury instructions in general. And then actually seeing, can I go a step further? Can I look at the verdict form? What did the jury understand? What didn't they understand? And it just really sets the stage, and particularly helpful if you do get close to the ending phase in trial when you are trying to create jury instructions as well. Motions to disqualify in 170.6 motions. This is something you should be searching. I'll go high level here just to show you. I think these are interesting to figure out potential biases in general. Motions to disqualify can tell you a lot if your opposing counsel has moved to disqualify a judge in the past, but also for 170.6s, which is peremptory challenge, it's requesting reassignment to a different judge. Does that happen a lot to your judge? Is it plaintiffs or defendants that tend to do it? And I would just search the judge and 170.6. So not sure if she gets dinged very often. But when I'm searching for a statute, whether it be a CCP statute, Gov Code, et cetera, I like to just search the numerical value of the statute. I find that's the easiest way. You'll find that judges and attorneys say CCP in so many different ways you can't imagine. So it is really, really helpful when you can just get right to the numerical value and dig in. And what I would do here is I dig into some of these dockets and I would see, okay, which party dinged her? And then I would see, who did the case get reassigned to? This is one of the practices that I like to do when I'm considering dinging a judge. I then look at the pool that is commonly reassigned when my judge gets dinged. And then I go immediately to the analytics and I look up analytics on those judges. It's a holistic assessment of whether dinging your judge is the right move. Often you may find that it's possible to get reassigned to a judge that could be even less favorable to you. Now, it's all part of a calculated risk that you'll want to make, but being informed and understanding who the potential pool is that's most common will set you up to at least make an informed decision about that. Good faith settlements is a fun way to dig in on settlement values that are otherwise private. We didn't talk much about opposing counsel, but it's one of my very favorite aspects to research. First, I research my judge, then I research opposing counsel. So first, How many cases do they have? Are they very busy right now? What types of cases do they handle? That'll be all in the docket section. Next, their motions. What motions have they filed in similar cases? If you can find a motion that your opposing counsel has filed in a similar case, you are very likely to understand how they might position the issue again. Much like everyone, we're starting with a starting place of a document that we've probably used in the past. So you will get a great understanding of how they've really thought about issues in the past. Here, I picked on Bismarck Chase, a plaintiff's firm, but that goes, again, you simply search the law firm. I would do or here as my term and connector, law firm or, and then individual attorney. And then of course I'd add next, legal issue, cause of action to dive in to understand. Searching across states, of course, you are not limited to California. We do have access to, at this point, 16 states, will be 26 states by the end of this year. And remember, when you are searching in a state, you are searching across multiple counties in that state as well, all through, and in this case, multiple counties, potentially states across the nation to be able to run a single search. I've got us there to the Q&A. I do realize we have a couple minutes left, so please let me know if you have any questions. In the meantime, I want to quickly show you alerts that we didn't get a chance to dive into. But we also have a robust alerting platform. And you may have noticed on any docket that I jumped into, there were track case changes. You'll notice it next to the judges as well. This basically sets an alert. So it can function much like probably any other alerting platform that you've seen at the federal level, where if you're tracking case changes, it will be at the docket level. We'll let you know if anything changed with the docket. Same with the judge. If you track a judge, we'll tell you their new cases as they're coming. We function very much like Google Alerts. You'll get an email in the morning with whatever triggered your alert from the day before, and you'll be able to stay up to date on that. My favorite aspect is actually not tracking the case or tracking the judge or party companies. Those are all useful as well. But my favorite is any sophisticated search that I can run, this opposing counsel, this motion type, this legal issue, and then tracking that topic. So if I add this, now it has added this alert to my queue. I can come in and request other recipients. I can exclude myself and just have the alert sent to other folks in my firm. I can include myself. But what's special about us and the alerting is that because we are indexing the body and text of the rulings and the filed documents, you can actually watch legal issues as they're moving their way across a state trial court, or new legislation, and you want to see how it's being applied. So alerting is a fabulous way to make sure that you are staying an expert in really niche practice areas. And if you ever want to control all of your alerts, it'll always be under your profile here, your alert section. This will be your alerts control panel. Now, all have far too many alerts set, but at the bottom of the page, you'll see some examples just to give you an idea of the types of alerts that you can set. So with that, I will open up to any questions. See if there are brave souls that have come in.
Hi, I have a question. How do we get, it says there's some way to get to try this out, to get the code or the password or something to try this out. How do I do that?
Oh, yes. If you have a Alameda County Law Library card, email us and, give us your information and we will get you the login information.
We also do enterprise trials with law firms as well, if you want to get your whole firm on board to try the product out. We find that giving you folks access to dig into the data is how we demonstrate value. So you can reach out as well directly to me or info@trellis.law if you'd like to set up a larger enterprise trial with your firm.
I have another question. How does this, Lexis has a something similar to this. I forget what they call it. Maybe they just call it Lexis Analytics. I don't know, but you're probably familiar with that. How does their what they do compare to what you're doing?
Yeah, so Lexis and Westlaw do a great job at Court of Appeals data. They do a great job on the federal side. The state trial court side is still very, very spotty. So we have much broader coverage at the state trial court level, which is what we focus in. Lex Machina is Lexis's most recent sort of judge analytics aspect of what we do. Again, I'd say the county coverage in general is very, very different. They're doing a great job with what they do. We just cover far more because we're able to focus on it right now.
Okay, thanks.
A great question on search relevancy. Do we ever reveal how our software analyzes info and elevates searches to the top of the list? The answer is that it takes a lot of different considerations in, which are all weighted differently. So some are going to be the recency of the data. Some is going to be how many searches other folks made. What are the documents that they opened? How long did they stay on those documents? How substantive are the documents, right? So it's actually taking in a ton of information into the relevancy algorithm, and you'll find different sorting regularly. Quick note there, though. Let's say you run a search very quickly. I know we have 1 moment left. And we've run our relevancy algorithm, but you say, Charles, I don't want your relevancy algorithm. I simply want to find the most recent. You can always switch newest to oldest. Now it will resort. It will get rid of our relevancy algorithm and it'll resort in order of date. Dockets actually has one more toggle, which is newest to oldest. What that means is that, no, I mean last updated, and last updated means it was refreshed the most recently. So the case could have been filed 5 years ago, but something happened in it very recently. So you'll always be able to sort there on these sorting mechanisms right here next to the search.
And I'm the one who asked that question. Is most relevant is the is linked to that search that you put in the search key terms, or is it somehow, is it looking at something else?
It's running a relevancy algorithm. So it's taking into consideration a bunch of the data points that I described, and that's what the default is going to be. It's going to default to most relevant unless you tell it to that you don't want that.
That you want newest to oldest. I see.
Yep. A couple other ways in the advanced search here, you can narrow to a couple specific areas. This is a sign of a cheat sheet if you want to do judge and party in the same search, but really it'll just show you how to do a good search of it so that you can understand.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate everyone spending time with me today. Hope it was interesting, and we will send along materials and hope you guys get a chance to dig into this data at some point.
Thank you, Ms. Clark.
Thanks, guys.
You have an amazing program. Thank you.